The Acolyte episode 7 has just dropped, where we see the Jedi's perspective on the tragedy of Brenock.
I fear for the girl's safety.
Returning to this key event in the story, we finally begin to unravel the truth. But heading into the finale, there's still plenty more to discover.
Only a virgin could create that type of power.
So grab your lightsabers and buckle up, as it's time to break it down. Before we jump in, remember to leave a thumbs up on the video if you enjoy it, and if you'd like to catch more of our Star Wars videos, then don't forget to subscribe to the channel. Okay, so with all out of the way, let's get into the Acolyte episode 7, titled Choice.
What's a virgin?
A concentration of force energy centered around a location.
A virgin could create life, like what we see on this planet. It's a power that should be studied, protected.
This episode sees us return to Brenock 16 years prior to the show's main timeline, which acts as effectively the second and possibly not the last flashback of the season. We catch up with the Jedi team taking samples and readings of the planet, and Padawan Torbin's pretty much had enough at this point. He doesn't see the greater importance of their mission to the Jedi. He's homesick and he's tired of eating something called Nuna Leg, which is a species of bird that we do know also inhabited the planet of Naboo. Really, he just wants to return to Coruscant, and this turns to be the whole driving force behind the Brenock tragedy. It's not the sole reason, but it's certainly a big player towards it. And it turns out the Jedi have been on Brenock for 7 weeks, yet to come across any signs of intelligent life. However, we learn 100 years ago the planet was deemed lifeless due to a hyperspace disaster that actually has been described before in the High Republic books. Now, the real reason the Jedi are there in the first place is because they're actually searching for a vergence in the Force, which is effectively a concentration of force energy that's usually centered around a location, or in rare instances around a person, as seen with Anakin Skywalker. Now, a vergence in the Force has been known to create life, and given that the planet's now covered in forests, the Jedi are there to see if it's inhabited by sentient species too. Anyways, the Jedi decide to split up to cover more ground as Sol takes the speeder bike north. Not long afterwards though, he encounters the Bunta tree, and this is where the lines of this episode and episode 3 begin to blur, where we see the beginning of the third episode play out again with Osha and May's argument. However, this time it's from the perspective of Sol, and the whole episode is from the perspective of Sol, or the Jedi. Now, this is where Sol's curiosity peaks. Not only has he found life on a planet believed to be uninhabited, but it turns out to be 2 children, both of which are capable of wielding the Force with some degree of training. So he follows them back to the fortress, which must be well hidden as the Jedi have been searching for 7 weeks prior to this and haven't found it. Now he climbs the wall where he sees firsthand Mother NSA is training the kids, as we saw in episode 3. Now, Sol's perspective lacks a lot of context. We know Mother NSA wasn't actually all that bad. Yeah, she was tough on the girls in training, but it came from the right place. She wanted to prepare them for the dangers they may face in life. Whereas what Sol sees here is the Witch Mother angry and directing it towards them. The training session was ended abruptly because a noise was heard outside. It turns out this was Sol all along, and the girls are then sent to their room. Now, as Sol leaves and returns to the Jedi camp to further elaborate on his findings and the danger he believes the twins are in, being a part of a coven, he tells the others he believes they're witches, and Torbin asks if they're Night Sisters. To which Indara replies that Night Sisters don't raise younglings, let alone train them. So in case you didn't know until now, this coven of witches are separate from the ones we've seen in Star Wars before. However, they certainly have their similarities, like the fact they both refer to the Force as the thread, so we can't rule out that both sects of witches originated from the same group a long time ago. Anyway, Indara thinks they should ask the council on what steps they should take, whereas Sol really doesn't think they have enough time for a back and forth chit chat with Coruscant. He believes the girls are in immediate danger, and you know what, there's a possibility he's actually right, which we'll get onto in a moment. Anyway, Sol asks Indara to come along with him back to the coven so she can witness what he has seen herself. The group travel back to the fortress, where it's revealed to be an old mining site, which we've known for a little while now due to it being in the official Star Wars databank on the website. But I speculate here that although we don't see any indication of the Sith being present in this episode, it doesn't mean that they aren't. It's just that we haven't seen them yet, and perhaps that'll be revealed in episode 8. However, the Sith at this time are known to have a strong interest in cortosis, as seen with Kymir's helmet. And with the dark side abilities being displayed by the Coven here being something we know that the Sith try and attempt in the future, I wouldn't be surprised to learn that perhaps this is an old cortosis mine offered to the Coven as a sanctuary, as they were forced into exile in return for the Sith learning some of the dark secrets of the Force. And now we're at the point where the Ascension ceremony is taking place. However, as I said, we're seeing it this time from the Jedi's perspective, We get the same back and forth between the two groups as we saw in episode 3, but we do get to see just how Mother Anastasia enters Torben's mind this time. Before she possesses him, she seduces him, offering to give him what he wants, the path to escape this planet and finally return to Coruscant. And now it seems it's only after Torben weakens and gives into his desires that she's able to fully take control of him, where we see his eyes go black. Anyway, the rest of this part plays out the same way episode 3 did, with the witches agreeing to bring the girls to the Jedi camp for testing. Anastasia releases Torben's mind and the Jedi make their way. Now, back on the ship, Sol reveals to Indara, after she said it was clever of him to suggest training the girls, as it buys them a bit of time to gain guidance from the Order, that he actually feels a connection to Osha, that he wasn't doing it to buy time, he actually wants her to become his first Padawan. However, Indara brushes it off as the twins are too old to begin their Jedi training, and besides, the cover would never allow it. Now, in this episode, we see May's testing as well as Osha's, which is something we didn't see the first time around. Indara asks her about her head symbol and why she has it. They then get onto the topic of the Ascension ceremony and how the twins need to undergo it to lead the Coven themselves. However, the twins aren't exactly sure on the finer details of it all, which certainly raises suspicions on what the Ascension ceremony is actually for. Indara questions how the twins will lead the Coven if they're still children, and Osha lets something slip that will certainly set off alarm bells in Sol's head, that everyone must be sacrificed to fulfill their destiny. Now, just what this means is unclear, and perhaps it will be revealed in the season finale. However, if we think back to the Power of Two chant, it seems to make a little bit more sense now. I think the Power of One is what will be revealed in a moment, where the two girls are the same, almost one being split into two. The Power of Two would be directly referencing the twins, and then the Power of Many would be the power of the entire Coven. Now, I think the entire Coven could be looking to sacrifice themselves in order to live on in the powerful twins, almost like a mass essence transfer, or the other way around, where the life force of the two girls will be harnessed to give the Coven eternal life, resulting in the sacrifice of the twins themselves. So, going back to what we said earlier, Sol definitely has a reason to be concerned for their immediate safety. Anyway, Torben takes the girls' blood samples for testing, whilst Indara makes initial contact with the Council and awaits a response. In the meantime, the Jedi had to continue with their mission of collecting samples from the planet. Now, pretty much straight away, the Council comes back and tells the Jedi the twins won't be trained, and that Jedi to stay away from the Coven's affairs. Now, the samples actually come back as showing that they have an exceptionally high M count themselves, and what's more, their symbionts are also identical. Now, this is unusual because even the symbionts of identical twins aren't exactly the same. So it's almost like they've taken two samples from the same person effectively, and apparently only a Virgins in the Force, the reason the Jedi are on the planet in the first place, would be able to take one being and split it into two, indicating the midichlorians have indeed been manipulated to create them. Now, as mentioned before, this is still different to how Anakin himself was created. The Force created Anakin totally on its own without the interference of a third party. It did it in response to Plagueis' attempts to create life, but it wasn't actually a part of his experiment. Now, here in this reveal, Torben's desperate to leave and return to Coruscant, and he sees the twins as his ticket home. They're living proof of a Virgins in the Force on Brenock, the whole reason they've been there 7 weeks in the first place. So Torben races towards the Coven, and this really is the result of Anastasia's plan backfiring. She prodded his desires to return home, clearly intensifying them, which in turn leads him to taking drastic measures to return home himself by taking the twins, and it's this that really kick-started the tragedy of Brenock that night. We catch up with Mother Kirill and May in another scene we didn't see in Osha's version of events. Here, Mother Kirill's telling May to become angry, effectively encouraging her to tap into her inner darkness to prevent the Jedi from taking Osha. Meanwhile, we see Mother Anastasia running it past the rest of the Coven that Osha wants to go with the Jedi, and that they should respect her wishes. However, the Coven aren't happy about it, telling Anastasia she's their leader now, not just the girl's mother. However, her mind's pretty much made up, which leads to the witches telling her that Osha's wishes will also sacrifice the future of the Coven. On top with what May said to the Jedi earlier about everyone's sacrifice to fulfill their destiny, it really does sound like the twins were going to be offered up in some capacity. Now, sensing Osha's being kept against their wishes, Sol and Torben make their way inside to save them, likely believing a sacrifice is imminent, whilst the witches are instructed to arm themselves and prepare for battle. Now, Sol questions the mothers on how the children were created, where Mother Anastasia foretells what's to one day happen to the Jedi, where every single one of them in the galaxy will be destroyed, which is effectively what happens in the main Star Wars timeline with Order 66. Meanwhile, we see a fire up the top of the fortress by burning Osha's notepad. Although she wanted to destroy the Jedi symbol she scratched within it, she never intended for it to spread like it did, with the fire spreading through the electrics inside the wall. So May runs down to seek help from her mother. Now, it's at this moment that tensions begin, the two groups increase even more, and now this part's a matter of interpretation, but from what I've seen here, I think Anastasia tries to make herself and May vanish into black smoke to remove them both from the inevitable conflict. However, when she does so, Sol misreads it as Anasan trying to harm the girl, who by the way Sol mistook for Osha here himself, and plunges a lightsaber into her black smoky apparition, which then kills her. And this is all observed by Mother Kirill, who's now enraged, Torbin and the young May. So of course it makes sense as to why she's no fan of the Jedi when she grows up. Now Kirill and Sol fire out whilst Torbin deflects the rest of the Coven's attacks, until Mother Kirill herself disappears into black smoke right before a possessed Kelnucka emerges to attack Sol and Torbin. And let's just say I really enjoyed seeing a Wookiee Jedi swing his saber around in live action. That was pretty cool. Anyway, Kelnucka's kicking 10 tons out of him until Indara shows up to the rescue and through the Force fights against the rest of the Coven herself, who have control of his mind, eventually overcoming him, resulting in Kelnucka being freed and the witches, well, maybe dead, or rather passed out, through pushing themselves too much in the Force trying to battle against Indara. Either way, they likely burned in the fire dead or alive. So Sol goes to try and rescue the twins from the rapidly spreading flames. Where we see the moment with both girls facing one another on the bridge, we learn that the bridge actually gives way a time before May falls, and Sol's holding both sides up using the Force, but he can't hold it for long. He had to make a choice on which side to save, otherwise they'd both go down, and in the end he chose Osha, the twin he felt a stronger connection to. Now back on the ship, Sol intends to face the Council and tell them the truth, the whole truth and nothing but the truth, which they'd face severe consequences for. After all, the Jedi told them not to interfere. Now Indara also believes they should tell the truth, but in the way of Obi-Wan from a certain point of view. Maybe she's like a relation of his of some sort. Now she questions why Sol would throw himself to the mercy of the Council, and reminds him of why he wanted to save Osha in the first place, and now that she's lost everything, would he take her dream of becoming a Jedi away as well? So the official story of Brenock will be that May started the fire, they managed to save Osha, but there were no other survivors. So overall, the episode did give us a lot of answers to the questions we were looking for. Interesting though, we still haven't seen the events truly through the perspective of May or even the witches, and it's in these events where I feel we'll most likely get the reveal of the Sith's involvement too. We've only got one episode left and we've got a lot to wrap up in the show's main timeline. So I'm not sure if we'll get that briefly in episode 8 or if it'll just be alluded to, if at all. The perspectives we've been given so far this season have been from the characters that gravitate towards the light side rather than the dark, but perhaps that's on purpose. One of the big reveals we'd likely see within the witches or even May's perspective would have been whether the twins were ever in any real serious danger of being sacrificed. Do you think they were? As always, drop your thoughts, theories and wildest speculations down in the comments below. Don't forget to give the video a big old thumbs up if you enjoyed it, and subscribe to the channel if you'd like to catch more of our Star Wars videos. I'll catch you in the next one. May the Force be with you.